A true story. It was summertime and twilight. We were sitting on the porch of the farmhouse on the summit of the hill, and Aunt Rachel was sitting respectfully below our level on the steps, for she was our servant and colored. She was of mighty frame and stature. She was 60 years old, but her eye was undimmed and her strength unabated. She was a cheerful, hearty soul, and there's no more trouble for her to laugh than it is for a bird to sing. She was under fire now, as usual when the day was done. That is to say, she was being chaffed without mercy and was enjoying it. She'd let off peal after peal of laughter, and then sit with her face in her hands and shake with throes of enjoyment which she could no longer get breath enough to express. At such a moment as this, a thought occurred to me, and I said, "Aunt Rachel, how is it that you've lived 60 years and never had any trouble?" She stopped quaking. She paused, and there was a moment of silence. She turned her face over her shoulder toward me and said, without even a smile in her voice, "Miss Stocy, is you in earnest?" Surprised me a good deal and sobered my manner and my speech too, and I said, "Why, I thought, that is, I meant, why, you can't have had any trouble. I've never heard you sigh and never seen your eye when there wasn't a laugh in it." She faced fairly around now and was full of earnestness. "As I had any trouble, Miss Stocy, I was going to tell you, then I'll leave it to you. I was born down amongst the slaves. I knows all about slavery because I've been one of my own self. Well, sir, my old man, that's my husband, he was loving and kind to me, just as kind as you is to your own wife, and we had children, 7 children, and we loved them children just the same as you loves your children. They was black, but the Lord can't make no children so black but what their mother loves them and wouldn't give 'em up, no, not for anything that's in this whole world. Well, sir, I was raised in old Virginia, but my mother, she was raised in Maryland. And my soul, she was terrible when she'd get started. My land, when she'd make the fur fly. When she'd get into them tantrums, she always had one word that she said. She'd straighten herself up and put her fists in her hips and say, "I want you to understand, I want born of the mash to be fooled by trash. I's one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is." 'Cause you see, that's what folks that's born in Maryland calls themselves, and they's proud of it. Well, that was her word. I don't because she said it so much, and because she said it one day when my little Henry tore his wrist awful, almost busted his head right up the top of his forehead, and the niggers didn't fly around fast enough to tend to him. And when they talked back at her, she up and she said, "Look-a-here," she says, "I want you niggers to understand I wasn't born the mash to be fooled by trash. I's one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is." And then she cleared that kitchen and bandaged up the child herself. So I says that word too, when I's riled. Well, by and by, my old mistress say she's broke and she got to sell all the niggers on the place. And when I hear that, they gwine to sell us all off at auction in Richmond. Oh, the good gracious, I know what that means. Aunt Rachel had gradually risen while she warmed to her subject, and now she towered above us, black against the stars. They put chains on us and put us on a stand as high as this porch, 20 foot high, and all the people stood around, crowds and crowds, and they'd come up there and look us all around and squeeze our arm and make us get up and walk, and then say, "This one too old, or this one lame, this one don't mount to much." And they sold my old man and took him away. They began to sell my children and take them away. And I began to cry. The man said, "Shut up, you damn blubber," and he hit me on the mouth with his hand. When the last one was gone but my little Henry, I grabbed him close up to my breast so, and I rise up and I says, "You shan't take him away," I says. "I'll kill the man that touches him," I says. But my little Henry whispered and say, "I gwine to run away, and then I'll work and buy you freedom." Oh, bless the child, he always so good. But they got it. They got it. The men did. But I took and teared the clothes most off of 'em and beat 'em over the head with my chain, and they give it to me too, but I didn't mind that. Well, there was my old man gone, and all my children, all my 7 children, and 6 of 'em I ain't set eyes on again to this day. That's 22 years ago, last Easter. The man that bought me belonged in New Bern, and he took me there. Well, by and by the years roll on, and the war come. My master, he was a Confederate colonel, and I was his family's cook. So when the Unions took that town, they all run away and left me all by myself with the other niggers in that monstrous big house. So the big Union officers move in there, and they ask me would I cook for them. Lord bless you, says I. That's what I's for. They weren't no small fry officers. Mind you, they was the biggest they is. And the way they made them soldiers mosey around, the general, he told me to boss that kitchen. And he say, if anybody come meddling with you, you just make 'em walk chalk. Don't you be afeard, he says. You's among friends now. Well, I thinks to myself, if my little Henry ever got a chance to run away, he'd make to the north, of course. So one day I comes in there where the big officers was in the parlor, and I drops a curtsy, so, and I up and told 'em about my Henry. They listened to my troubles just the same as if I was white folks. And I says, what I come for is because if he got away and come up north, where you gentlemen comes from, you might have seen him maybe, and could tell me so as I could find him again. He was very little, and he had a scar on his left wrist and at the top of his forehead. Then they look mournful, and the general says, how long since you lost him? And I say, 13 years. Then the general say, he wouldn't be little no more now. He's a man. I never thought of that before. He was only that little feller to me yet. I never thought about him growing up and being big, but I'd see it then. None of the gentlemen run across him so they couldn't do nothing for me, but all that time, though I didn't know it, my Henry was run off to the north, years and years. And he was a barber, too, and worked for himself. And by, when the war come, he ups and he says, I's done barbering, he says. I's going to find my old mammy, less'n she's dead. So he sold out and went where they was recruiting and hired himself out to the colonel for his servant. And then he went all through the battles everywhere hunting for his old mammy. Yes, indeed, he'd hired first one officer, then another, till he ransacked the whole South. But you see, I didn't know nothing about this. How was I going to know it? Well, one night we had a big soldier ball. The soldiers there at New Bern was always having balls and carrying on. They had 'em in my kitchen heaps of times, 'cause it was so big. Mind you, I was down on such doings, 'cause my place was with the officers, and it harassed me to have them common soldiers cavorting around my kitchen like that, but I always stood around and kept things straight, I did. Sometimes they'd get my dander up, and then I'd make 'em clear the kitchen. Mine, I tell you. Well, one night, it was a Friday night, there comes a whole platoon from a nigger regiment that was on guard at the house. The house was headquarters, you know, and then I was just a bilin'. Mad? I was just a booming. I swelled around and I swelled around. I was just a itching for 'em to do something for to start me, and they was a waltzing and a dancing. My, but they was having a time, and I just a swelling up, and pretty soon, along comes such a spruce young nigger a sailing down the room with a yeller wench round his waist. Round and round and round they went, enough to make a buddy drunk to look at 'em. When they got abreast of me, they went to kind of balance around, first on one leg and then on t'other, and smiling in my big red turban and making fun, and I ups and says, get along with you, rubbage. The young man's face kind of changed all of a sudden for about a second, then he went to smiling again, same as he was before. Well, about this time, in comes some niggers that played music and belonged to the band, and they never could get along without putting on airs. And the very first air they put on that night, I lit into 'em. They laughed, and that made me worse. The rest of the nigger got to laughing, and then my soul alive, but I was hot. My eye was just a-blazing. I just straightened myself up so just as I is now, plumb to the ceiling most, and I digs my fist into my hips, and I says, look here, I says, I want you niggers to understand that I want born and demashed to be fooled by trash. I's one of the old blue hen's chickens, I is. And then I see that young man standing staring and stiff, looking kind of up at the ceiling like he forgot something and couldn't remember it no more. Well, I just march on them niggers, so looking like a general, and they just gave way for me and out at the door. And as this young man was going out, I hear him say to another nigger, Jim, he says, you go along and tell the captain I be on hand about 8 o'clock in the morning. There's something on my mind, he says. I don't sleep no more this night. You go along, he says, and leave me by my own self. This was about 1 o'clock in the morning. Well, about 7, I was up and on hand getting the officers' breakfast. I was a stooping down by the stove, just so, same as if your foot was the stove, and I'd opened the stove door with my right hand, so, pushing it back, just as I pushes your foot, and I just got the pan of hot biscuits in my hand, and was about to raise up, when I see a black face come round under mine, and the eyes are looking up into mine, just as eyes are looking up close under your face now, and I just stopped right there and never budged. Just gazed and gazed so, and the pan began to tremble, and all of a sudden I knowed. The pan dropped on the floor, and I grabbed his left hand and shoved back his sleeve, just so, as I was doing to you. And then I goes for his forehead and pushed the hair back so. Boy, I says, if you ain't my Henry, what is you doing with this welt on your wrist and that scar on your forehead? The Lord God of heaven be praised. I got my own again. Oh, no, Mr. C. I ain't had no trouble. No joy.